This is Arthur Barrio with a summary of the news from the NBC newsroom in Washington. The newsmen who are tagging along with President Truman on his current political junket may return to Washington a tired bunch of boys. Mr. Truman's maintaining a tough pace. Today, for example, up before dawn. Up at 3 a.m., as a matter of fact, to greet Chicago political leaders who stepped aboard the train to visit him. Says Chicago's Jake Harvey, the president didn't say much. He was pretty sleepy. But when the sun came up, so did the president, to lash out once again at the 80th Congress. The Congress, he charged, is controlled by lobbies bent on a boom or bust.
As the clock ticked down to Election Day 1948, NBC broadcast news with Arthur Barrio. The U.S. emerged from the war a superpower, expected to have the largest hand in rebuilding Europe. But the country was also carrying a $240 billion war debt. In the 2 years after the war ended, more than 5 million Americans went on strike. It debilitated key sectors of the economy and stifled production, causing the largest inflation rise in the country's modern history. And the Taft-Hartley Act, limiting the power of labor unions. The strikes didn't end. On October 26th, the Radio Writers Guild struck for fair wages and for RWG guideline adherence by ad agencies. Their focus was the coming new medium, television. Negotiations would continue into 1949.
Armed and loaded with weight equivalent to bombs.
With President Truman's approval rating as low as 32%, the DNC convened in July. Northern Democrats pushed for a strong civil rights platform, which the president was in favor of. Conservative Southern Dems were opposed. Moderates feared voter alienation. When the convention adopted the civil rights plank in a close vote, Southern Dems walked out and split off, nominating Strom Thurmond for president. They became known as the Dixiecrats. They hoped to force a contingent election in the House of Representatives, extracting concessions from either Dewey or Truman. Truman also faced a challenge in former VP Henry Wallace, who launched the Progressive Party, challenging Truman's Cold War policies.
And to remain the head of 17 million subjects. And briefly, some other news notes. Governor Dewey is host today to about 100 radio and newspaper farm editors. He invited them to his Pauling, New York home to obtain their ideas on what the farmer needs to remain prosperous. Henry Wallace is scheduled to speak tonight in Boston, and members of the Socialist Party plan to picket the hall. Meantime, Boston police will be on hand to prevent any egg or tomato throwing, such as Wallace experienced recently on his campaign tour.
On October 30th, Republican nominee Thomas E. Dewey ended his campaign before 18,000 at Madison Square Garden. He'd run against FDR in 1944, losing, but received 46% of the popular vote. After President Roosevelt passed away, there were many who felt Dewey made a better post-war choice than Harry Truman. In the 1946 New York gubernatorial election, Dewey won by nearly 700,000 votes, the most in New York history to that point.
But the Security Council will begin deliberations today. In Jerusalem, all of the city's 90,000 Jews have been placed under virtual house arrest. The curfew is being imposed by the Israeli army and is to remain in effect until further notice. 6 military policemen are guarding the United States consulate, and 2 military policemen will accompany any UN car in the city. France has proposed that Jerusalem be made an international zone.
Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the Arab-Israeli war raged on. Fighting started the previous November. It ramped after Palestine was officially dissolved and Israel declared independence on May 14th. Count Benedot of Visbor was assassinated in September by 4 members of the Jewish Zionist group Lehi, one of whom, Yitzhak Shamir, would go on to be the 7th Prime Minister of Israel. Operation Hiram ended on Halloween with Israeli forces claiming to have complete control of Galilee.
There may be today some sort of last-minute rush in installment buying. New government controls setting minimum down payments go into effect Monday. So merchants are more or less ready for those customers trying to beat the deadline.
The Cold War was growing, with Americans investigating potential communist cells within the government, fearing the world could split into 2 distinct groups, those who supported democracy and those in favor of totalitarianism.
So that they'll know what their husbands are talking about when they come up with such expressions as triple play or quarterback sneak. And that's the news to the moment. This is Arthur Barrio in Washington. And now, after a brief pause for station identification, we take you to New York, where you will hear a forum discussion as a prelude to United Nations Week.
Sure, I heard you, but stop making like a civics teacher, will you? What difference could my one vote make? Be a good guy, huh? Stop trying to sell me.
No sale.
I've never voted, and I never will. A woman's place is in the home. Leave politics to the men.
No sale.
Whatever way you slice it, no matter how you dress it, politics is still a dirty business. Why vote for any of them? Let's sit this one out.
No sale.
Living 1948. Brought to you each week by NBC and its affiliated stations, today holds up its mirror to reflect the whys and the wherefores of the great retreat from democracy, when half our voting population will not go to the polls next Tuesday, in a drama document entitled,
Let's sit this one out.
And here, to help us explore the voting habits of you, his fellow citizens, is your narrator, Ben Grauer.
Greetings, America. For weeks now, the song has been heard throughout the land.
At 4:35 from WNBC in New York, Living 1948 took to the air with a drama called Let's Sit This One Out. It focused on registered voters who don't vote.
And next Tuesday, between dawn and evening, that siren song must pay off in voters sashaying down to the polling booth. But will it pay off? We needn't wait until Wednesday for the answer.
According to an early estimate by the Gallup poll, out of 93 million citizens of voting age, 47 million will vote next Tuesday. 46 million will sit this one out.
Or, putting it another way,
49% of our potential voters will be Election Day wallflowers.
and yet come Wednesday, November 3rd, you may well find that the sitters out, by voting, might have changed the result of the election, all the way down the line from the presidency to justice of the peace. To show you what we mean, let's go back to an election not so many years ago. In the October days of that year, someone everywhere was saying,
might as well try to stop the wind from blowing. Why should I even bother going across the street to the polling place? What earthly good would my one measly vote do?
So our nearsighted friend and millions of others sat out that election. Their uncast votes certainly didn't help the loser, but they did help the victor. This is how they did it.
In 26 states, with 268 electoral votes, enough to win, the victor had a total majority of only 340,000 votes, less than one vote per 100 people.
In 16 states, had only 1 out of every 10 non-voters cast a ballot, the election might have been reversed.
Do you get the idea now, Mr. Election Wallflower? Did you ever hear of a team winning a World Series by never showing up at the ballpark? How about that, Mr. Wallflower?
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Now, don't take my word for it. Let's see what can happen when the Wallflowers suddenly decide to join the dance. In 1916, with America on the verge of war, Charles Evans Hughes and Woodrow Wilson were opposed for the presidency. A few hours after the polls closed, 2 newspaper men met in a hotel room in Washington.
What are you doing up? I thought you'd gone to bed.
Yeah, I'm on my way, Pete, but I thought I'd stop by and collect something to sweeten my dreams. How's about forking over that 100 you bet on Wilson?
What's the rush?
Well, you know me. I never believe in putting off for tomorrow what I can collect tonight. It's in the bag, Petey boy. Hughes has just gone off to bed with the words, "Good night, Mr. President," ringing in his ears.
You're all jumping the gun, Al. We're still waiting for the results from California.
Okay, if you want to be technical about it. But you must be expecting a modern miracle. California's always been Republican.
Not this year, brother. I got a hunch California's going for Wilson.
Democratic for the first time in history? Oh, come on. Let's have the dough. I'll buy you a nightcap.
Just a minute. I think Hughes put his foot in it when he snubbed Governor Hiram Johnson. Johnson's the most popular man in California. My hunch says that people will be sore enough to get off their perches and vote for Wilson. In fact, I'll lay another 50 on that hunch.
You're on, sucker.
And with early morning came the results from California. The sit-out votes had gone to the polls. For the first time in history, the Democrats carried the state. By a mighty slender 2,000 votes, the state went to Wilson, and with the state went the presidency. You get it now, Mr. Wallflower?
I think I do. Sitting out an election will never help elect your candidates, but it may very well fatten the chances of the opposition.
You've got it.
That government is strongest, of which every man feels himself a part.
Thomas Jefferson said that.
Living 1948 was conceived as a radio mirror of contemporary U.S. life.
Certainly you must recall a civics class in which...
The shows range from surveys to dramatic histories to commentaries. Hosted by Ben Grauer, it featured some of New York's best radio actors, like Art Carney, Alexander Skirby, Claudia Morgan, Marilyn Erskine, and Barry Thompson.
Without exercising your franchise. A democracy cannot remain sound and healthy without real participation by its citizens.
CBS, taking note, launched the People Act to rival the program. By late 1948, their network competition was in its third decade.
90% of those eligible went to the polls.
Ah, but that was in Italy.
In 1946, 81, 76, and 74%.
Ah, but that was in another country, in fact, 3 other countries, namely France, Great Britain, and Canada. In our own democracy in that same year of 46, we set a new all-time record for the number of voters that didn't. Only 38% of Americans cast ballots.
Korea, over 90%.
Italy, 90%.
France, 81%.
England, 76%.
But in our own United States, only 38%. Dr. George Gallup called it one of the worst scandals of our American democracy. How does it come about, this sorry record? This business of non-voting that scandalizes our fair democratic name?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but up until 2 years ago, I just never felt that I had anything to vote for one way or the other. Now it's a different matter.
What changed your mind?
I inherited an apartment house and also a business building. I've got 2 good reasons for voting now.